My mom demanded I pay $15,000 for my sister's wedding. When I said no, she stole my credit card and drained my savings but couldn't stop laughing. The next day, my sister called me panicking. I always knew my mother loved Jessica more than me. There's something about being the second daughter that makes you hyper-aware of every unequal gesture, every biased comment, every moment where you're expected to sacrifice while your sibling takes center stage. But knowing something and having it shoved in your face are two entirely different experiences. The call came on a Tuesday evening while I was reviewing quarterly reports for the marketing firm where I'd worked my way up to senior account manager. Mom's voice had that saccharine quality she used when she wanted something big. "Sweetheart, I need to talk to you about Jessica's wedding." My stomach dropped. Jessica had been engaged to Brandon for 8 months, and every conversation with my family had revolved around the upcoming nuptials. The venue. The dress. The flowers. The photographer who'd shot some celebrity's wedding in Malibu. Everything had to be perfect for my sister's special day. "What about it?" I asked, already sensing danger. "Well, your father and I have been crunching numbers, and we're a bit short. The wedding planner found this absolutely gorgeous reception venue in Napa Valley, and Jessica has her heart set on it. But it's going to cost more than we initially budgeted." I waited. There had to be more. "We need $15,000, Lauren. And since you're doing so well at your job, we thought you could contribute to your sister's happiness." The audacity stole my breath. $15,000? That was 3 months of my take-home pay. Money I'd saved meticulously, sacrificing vacations and designer clothes and nights out with friends. Money that represented security in an uncertain world. "Mom, I can't afford that. I have my own expenses, my own goals. I'm saving for a down payment on a condo." Her tone shifted instantly, losing all pretense of sweetness. "Jessica is your sister. Family helps family. Do you know how much your father and I spent raising you? Feeding you, clothing you, putting a roof over your head? And now when we need help with one thing, one special day for your sister, you're going to be selfish?" The guilt trip was classic Mom. She'd perfected the art over decades of manipulating me into compliance. But I was 32 years old, not 12. I built boundaries through years of therapy. "I'm sorry, but my answer is no. I'll contribute what I can reasonably afford, maybe $2,000. But $15,000 is out of the question." The silence stretched between us like a chasm. Then she hung up without another word. 3 days passed. I should have known the quiet wouldn't last. My parents had never accepted no gracefully, especially not from me. Jessica called the boundaries I'd established rebellious phases, even though I'd maintained them consistently for years. To them, I was still the compliant daughter who should fall in line. Friday afternoon, I stopped by the grocery store after work. The cashier ran my credit card 3 times before informing me it had been declined. Confused, I tried my debit card. Same result. My face flushed with embarrassment as the line behind me grew longer. I mumbled an apology and left my cart, rushing to my car to check my banking app. My checking account showed a balance of $47.23. My savings account, which had contained $28,000 just days earlier, now held $1,200. My credit card had been maxed out at its $10,000 limit, showing a current balance of $9,847 in new charges. The panic hit first, followed immediately by a horrible realization. I scrolled through the transactions with shaking hands. Wire transfers. Large purchases at bridal boutiques, florists, and catering companies. All made within the past 72 hours. All while I'd been at work, trusting that my money was secure. I called my bank immediately, barely keeping my voice steady as I reported the fraud. The representative put me on hold multiple times, conferring with supervisors. When she returned, her voice carried bad news. "Ms. Patterson, these transactions were all authorized with your correct PIN and security information. Several were made in person with your physical cards. Do you know who might have access to your cards and personal information?" My mother had keys to my apartment. I'd given them to her years ago for emergencies, back when I still believed family meant safety. She'd been alone there 2 weeks earlier when I'd asked her to water my plants while I attended a conference in Chicago. She must have gone through my desk, found my cards, and somehow obtained my pins. The security questions. She knew my first pet's name, the street I grew up on, my father's middle name. She'd watched me create those accounts when I'd first opened them at 18, still living at home. I sat in my car outside the bank for 20 minutes, trying to process what had happened. The violation felt physical, like someone had reached inside my chest and ripped out a piece of me. Every dollar in those accounts represented hours of my life. Late nights finishing presentations. Weekend work sessions. Skipped lunches to save money. Declined invitations because I was prioritizing my future over temporary pleasures. And my mother had erased it all with a few transactions, as casually as one might swipe through items at a checkout counter. The bank representative had been sympathetic but clear about the limitations. Because the person who used my cards had correct information and physical possession of the cards themselves, the fraud investigation would take weeks, possibly months. In the meantime, I'd have to survive on the remaining $1,200 in my savings and whatever credit I could scrape together. My hands trembled as I started the engine. The drive to my parents' house took 35 minutes through Friday evening traffic. Every red light gave me time to rehearse what I'd say, to imagine the responses, to prepare for the gaslighting I knew was coming. My family had perfected the art of rewriting history to suit their narrative. Black became white. Theft became generosity. Boundaries became selfishness. But I had evidence now. Transaction records. Timestamps. A paper trail that couldn't be talked away or rationalized into something else. The sun was setting when I pulled up to their house, painting their well-maintained suburban home in orange light that made everything look deceptively warm and welcoming. Jessica's silver Lexus sat in the driveway next to Brandon's truck, a graduation gift from his parents that probably cost more than I made in 6 months. Perfect. An audience for the confrontation I was about to have. I climbed the front steps, each one feeling heavier than the last. The doorbell echoed inside, followed by approaching footsteps. Mom answered the door wearing a smile that didn't reach her eyes, the kind of expression she used for neighbors she didn't particularly like but had to be polite to. "Lauren, what a surprise." The casual greeting, as if nothing had happened, ignited something hot and sharp in my chest. "You stole from me." I pushed past her into the foyer, not waiting for an invitation. "You took my cards and drained my accounts." She had the nerve to look confused. "I have no idea what you're talking about." $15,000 disappeared from my savings. My credit card has almost $10,000 in fraudulent charges. All the transactions are for Jessica's wedding expenses. My voice rose with each sentence. The bank says someone used my physical cards with correct security information. Jessica appeared from the living room, Brandon trailing behind her. Her eyes widened in theatrical innocence. "Mom, what's she talking about?" "Your fiancé knows exactly what I'm talking about." I turned to face my mother. "Give me back my money. Right now." Mom's expression hardened into something cold and dismissive. "I didn't steal anything. Your family. Family shares resources. Jessica needed help, and you refused to provide it, so I found another way. Consider it repayment for everything we've done for you over the years." The justification was so absurd I almost laughed. "That's not how the law works. You committed fraud. Identity theft. I can press charges." "Go ahead." She crossed her arms. "Explain to the police how your own mother, who had your emergency keys and knew your security information because you trusted her, somehow stole from you. Explain how you gave her access to your apartment and your personal information voluntarily. See how far that gets you." Dad emerged from his study, looking uncomfortable but saying nothing. He never contradicted Mom. 35 years of marriage had beaten any backbone out of him. Jessica stepped forward, her face arranged in an expression of wounded betrayal. "I can't believe you're making such a big deal about this. It's my wedding, Lauren. The most important day of my life. And you're acting like money matters more than my happiness." Something inside me snapped. Years of being second place, of watching my achievements get minimized while Jessica's mediocre accomplishments received parades, of sacrificing my needs for her wants, it all crystallized into clarity. "You're right," I said quietly. "This is about more than money." I pulled out my phone and called a police non-emergency line right there in their living room. Mom's face went pale as I calmly reported the theft, providing transaction details, dates, and amounts. The dispatcher said an officer would be there within 30 minutes to take a statement. "You're actually doing this?" Jessica's voice climbed into a shriek. "You're going to ruin my wedding over money?" "No," I said. "I'm holding Mom accountable for stealing from me. Your wedding was never my financial responsibility." The officer who arrived was younger than I expected, probably in his early 30s, with kind eyes that had seen enough family disputes to recognize the pattern. He introduced himself as Officer Martinez and patiently took statements from everyone present. Mom maintained her innocence with impressive conviction, explaining that she'd simply borrowed money from family with the full intention of paying it back. Jessica stood beside her, arms crossed, playing the role of wounded party with practiced precision. Brandon, to his credit, looked increasingly uncomfortable as the truth emerged. He pulled Jessica aside at one point, and I could hear their heated whispers even though I couldn't make out the words. His body language screamed disapproval, jaw tight, shoulders tense, hands moving in frustrated gestures. Officer Martinez documented everything methodically. He photographed my bank statements on my phone, took notes about the timeline, and carefully explained the legal nuances. While family relationships complicated things, the facts remained clear. Someone had accessed my accounts without authorization and stolen a significant sum. The fact that my mother had keys to my apartment didn't grant her legal access to my financial information or permission to use my credit cards. "Ma'am," he said to my mother, his tone professional but firm, "I strongly recommend you consult with an attorney. These charges are serious. Identity theft and fraud aren't misdemeanors we can simply wave away because you're related to the victim." Mom's face had gone from flushed to pale during his explanation. The reality was sinking in. This wasn't something she could manipulate or charm her way out of. This had real legal consequences that existed outside her control. Dad finally spoke up from his position near the stairs. "Officer, surely there's a way to resolve this within the family? We'll pay her back. It was a misunderstanding." Officer Martinez turned to him. "Sir, that's between your family members to work out. But from a legal standpoint, unauthorized access to financial accounts is a crime regardless of familial relationships. Your daughter has every right to press charges if she chooses." Jessica's crying had escalated into full theatrical sobs by this point. "This is supposed to be the happiest time of my life, and she's destroying it over money. What kind of sister does that?" The question hung in the air like smoke. I met her eyes directly. The kind who refuses to be stolen from. The kind who understands that unconditional love doesn't mean zero consequences. The kind who's tired of being treated like an ATM machine that exists solely to fund your lifestyle. Her mouth fell open. In 32 years, I'd never spoken to her that bluntly. I'd always swallowed my resentment, buried my hurt, and played the role of the understanding older sister who should know better than to cause problems. Officer Martinez finished his documentation and handed me a case number. "Miss Patterson, you'll need to follow up with the Detective Division on Monday. They'll help you navigate the next steps. In the meantime, document everything. Keep copies of all communications, save any text messages or emails related to this incident, and don't engage in any conversations without witnesses or recordings." After he left, the silence in the house felt suffocating. Mom sank onto the couch, her carefully constructed facade crumbling. Jessica stood frozen in the middle of the living room, mascara streaking down her face. Brandon watched me with an expression I couldn't quite read, part respect, part concern, part something else. Dad was the one who finally broke the silence. "Lauren, please. Let's talk about this rationally. Family shouldn't involve police in private matters." "Private matters?" My voice came out sharper than intended. "Dad, she committed fraud. She stole almost $30,000 from me. That's not a private family disagreement about holiday plans. That's a felony. We'll pay you back," he insisted, desperation creeping into his voice. "Give us time to figure out the finances, and we'll make this right." "How much time? A month? 6 months? A year? Meanwhile, I'm supposed to survive on $1,200 and just trust that the woman who already stole from me will eventually make good on her promise?" I shook my head. That's not how this works anymore. I left that night knowing I'd crossed a threshold I could never uncross. The family dynamics that had governed my entire life, the unspoken rules about keeping peace, protecting Mom's feelings, prioritizing Jessica's needs, had shattered completely. And standing in the wreckage, I felt something unexpected: freedom. The drive home took longer than usual. I needed time to decompress, to process what had just happened. I stopped at a 24-hour diner and ordered coffee I didn't really want, just to sit in a booth and exist in neutral space for a while. The server, an older woman with kind eyes, seemed to sense I needed silence. She refilled my cup without asking if everything was okay. My phone buzzed constantly with texts. Aunt Carol wanted to know what was going on. Cousin Mike said he'd heard something happened and asked if I needed to talk. Uncle Steve sent a long message about the importance of family unity and forgiveness. I ignored them all. Eventually, I made it home to my apartment. The space felt different now, tainted by the knowledge that my mother had violated it. She'd stood in my bedroom, opened my desk drawers, searched through my personal papers until she found what she wanted. How long had she planned it? Had she come with the intention of stealing from me, or had the opportunity presented itself and she'd simply seized it? I'd given her those keys during a vulnerable moment 3 years earlier when I'd had emergency surgery and needed someone to care for my cat. She'd seemed so supportive then, so maternal and concerned. And all along, she'd just been waiting for leverage, for access, for a moment when my guard was down. But here's where the story gets interesting. I didn't just file reports and hope for resolution. I'd spent years in marketing, learning how to research, how to track information, and how to leverage social media. That night, fueled by rage and betrayal, I started digging. Jessica had been posting about her wedding constantly on Instagram, Facebook, and Pinterest. Every detail was documented in real time. The $3,000 dress from Kleinfeld's. The $5,000 destination bachelorette party in Miami. The $8,000 photographer package. The $15,000 reception venue in Napa. I created a spreadsheet documenting every expense she'd publicly shared, cross-referencing them with the fraudulent charges on my accounts. Then I expanded my research. Marriage licenses are public record. So are small claims court filings. Business registrations. Property records. Brandon's family owned a successful chain of hardware stores across Northern California. They had money, real money. The kind that made my parents' comfortable middle-class lifestyle look modest. I found property records showing Brandon's parents had recently gifted him a house in Walnut Creek valued at $1.2 million. They weren't paying for the wedding because Jessica wanted her parents to demonstrate their love by funding everything. It was a power play, a way to maintain control and prove they valued her enough to sacrifice for her special day. And when my parents couldn't meet every demand, Mom had turned to stealing from me rather than accepting help from Brandon's wealthy family or scaling back expectations. I made copies of everything: the police report, the fraudulent transaction records, screenshots of Jessica's social media posts documenting her expensive wedding plans, the property records showing Brandon's family wealth. And I compiled it all into a neat digital folder. Then I waited. Mom called the next morning, her voice tight with forced calm. "Lauren, let's be reasonable. Drop the police report, and we'll work out a payment plan to return your money." "No. You're being vindictive. This is your sister's happiness we're talking about. This is my financial security we're discussing. Money I worked for and saved. You don't get to steal from me and then dictate terms for returning it." She hung up. An hour later, Jessica called. "Please, Lauren. Mom's freaking out. Dad's having chest pains from the stress. You're tearing this family apart." The manipulation was so obvious it would have been funny if it wasn't so sad. I'm not tearing anything apart. Mom's actions did that. She could have accepted my no and found another solution. Instead, she committed fraud. It's not fraud when it's family. Actually, legally, it absolutely is. Jessica dissolved into sobs. The wedding is in 6 weeks. If Mom gets arrested, everything will be ruined. Can't you just let it go? Can't you be the bigger person for once? There it was. The expectation that I'd sacrifice myself once again for their comfort. That I'd absorb the harm and move on because demanding accountability was somehow worse than committing the initial offense. Goodbye, Jessica. I spent the weekend compiling evidence and consulting with a lawyer who specialized in family law and fraud cases. She was a sharp woman named Patricia Chen who'd heard similar stories before. Family members stealing from each other, justifying it with obligations and guilt, then acting shocked when held accountable. "You have an excellent case," Patricia said, reviewing my documentation. "The challenge is whether you want to pursue criminal charges, civil action, or both. Criminal charges might result in probation or community service for a first offense, especially given her age and lack of prior record. Civil action would focus on financial restitution plus damages." "I want my money back," I said. "And I want her to understand she can't do this." Patricia smiled grimly. "Then let's make sure she understands very clearly." The credit card company's fraud department called me the next morning. After reviewing my police report and the circumstances, they agreed to reverse all unauthorized charges and issue me a new card. The $10,000 in wedding expenses charged to my card would be written off as fraud, and I wouldn't be liable for any of it. Small victories, but I take them. Still, the $26,800 stolen from my savings remained unrecovered, sitting in the accounts of various wedding vendors or already spent on deposits and services. Monday morning, Jessica called me panicking. Her voice was barely coherent through the tears. "Lauren, something terrible happened. The venue called. They're canceling our booking." My hand tightened on my phone. Why would they do that? I don't know. They said something about a dispute over payment authorization. Brandon's calling his lawyer. Mom's having a breakdown. The wedding is in 6 weeks, and now we have no venue. Every other decent place is already booked for September. This is a disaster. I let the silence stretch before responding. "That's unfortunate." "Unfortunate? Is that all you can say? You know Mom used your card for the venue deposit. Did you tell them the payment was fraudulent?" "I reported fraudulent charges to my bank, yes. As I'm legally entitled to do. The bank must have contacted vendors for chargebacks." "You're destroying my wedding." Her voice hit a pitch that probably terrified nearby dogs. "How can you be so cruel?" "Jessica, I didn't steal money and fund a wedding with it. That was Mom. These are consequences of her actions, not mine. We're family. You're supposed to support me." Support doesn't mean enabling theft. It doesn't mean sacrificing my financial security for your extravagant party. You and Brandon could have had a beautiful wedding within your actual budget. You chose not to. You chose to pressure Mom, who then chose to steal from me. None of that is my responsibility. She was still sobbing when I ended the call. I felt a flicker of guilt, residual programming from years of being trained to prioritize her feelings over my own boundaries. But I pushed it aside. This wasn't about revenge. This was about justice. The chargebacks cascaded through the week like dominoes falling in slow motion. Each vendor contacted by my credit card company had a choice: accept the chargeback and cancel services, or provide proof of authorization for the charges. Since Mom had used my stolen cards rather than her own payment methods, they had no legitimate authorization to provide. Tuesday morning, the florist canceled. Jessica called me in hysterics, barely coherent between sobs. They canceled the flower order. $10,000 worth of roses and peonies and centerpieces, just gone. Do you have any idea how hard it was to secure those arrangements? The florist is booked solid through the end of the year. I listened to her panic with a strange detachment, like watching a movie where you already know the ending. That's unfortunate, but it's a consequence of using stolen money. Maybe you can find a different florist. A different florist? Her voice climbed into a register only dogs could fully appreciate. 6 weeks before the wedding? Everyone good is already booked. We'll be lucky to get grocery store bouquets at this point. Then maybe grocery store bouquets will have to be enough. The silence that followed was arctic. You're enjoying this, she finally said. You're enjoying watching my wedding fall apart. I'm not enjoying anything, Jessica. I'm simply not sacrificing myself to fix a problem I didn't create. There's a difference. She hung up without another word. 2 hours later, the photographer's assistant called my phone by mistake. They'd meant to reach Jessica but had the numbers confused. The woman apologized profusely when she realized her error, but not before I overheard her saying something about needing to verify payment before the wedding date. Thursday brought the catering catastrophe. The upscale Napa Valley catering company that Jessica had bragged about on social media, the one that had catered some celebrity's anniversary party, sent a formal letter canceling their contract. They'd been paid a 50% deposit of $8,000 using my credit card. The chargeback from my credit card company's fraud investigation meant they considered the contract void. Mom called me from a number I didn't recognize. I answered before checking the caller ID, a mistake I immediately regretted. Lauren, please. You have to stop this. The caterer canceled. Jessica is devastated. She's talking about postponing the wedding entirely because everything is falling apart. Then maybe she should postpone it. Or scale back. Or accept help from Brandon's parents. Those are all reasonable options. His parents? Mom's voice dripped with disdain. We don't need charity from them. We're perfectly capable of providing for our daughter's wedding. Except you're not, which is why you stole from me in the first place. Her sharp intake of breath told me I'd hit a nerve. This isn't about capability. This is about you punishing your sister because you've always been jealous of her. The accusation was so absurd it almost made me laugh. Jealous? Of what, exactly? Her inability to live within a budget? Her expectation that everyone else should fund her lifestyle? Her complete lack of consideration for anyone but herself? She's getting married. This is supposed to be her special day. And that's wonderful for her. But her special day doesn't justify committing fraud against me. It doesn't give you the right to steal $30,000. It doesn't make me obligated to absorb financial abuse in silence. Mom's voice turned cold, calculating. You know what I think? I think you're bitter because you're 32 and single while your younger sister is getting married. This is about your own failures, not about the money. The manipulation was textbook, attack my insecurities to deflect from her actions. But years of therapy had armored me against this particular tactic. My relationship status has nothing to do with you committing fraud. Nice try though. I hung up and immediately blocked that number too. My block list was growing longer by the day. Thursday afternoon brought an unexpected visitor to my office. Jessica showed up during my lunch break, her eyes red-rimmed and face blotchy from crying. She looked genuinely distraught, not the performative distress she usually deployed for sympathy. Can we talk? She asked. Please. Just 5 minutes. Against my better judgment, I agreed. We walked to a small park across from my office building and sat on a bench overlooking a duck pond. Families with young children played nearby, their laughter creating a strange contrast to our tense silence. I didn't know Mom was going to do it, Jessica said quietly. I swear I didn't. When she told me she'd secured funding for the additional expenses, I assumed she'd taken out a loan or something. I never imagined she'd steal from you. I studied her face, looking for signs of deception. She seemed sincere, but Jessica had always been good at seeming sincere when it served her purposes. But you knew I'd said no when she asked me for money, I pointed out. You knew I'd refused to contribute $15,000 because it was beyond my means. And yet you didn't question where the money suddenly came from? She had the grace to look ashamed. I didn't want to question it. I wanted the wedding I'd been planning. The venue, the flowers, the photographer, all of it. So I convinced myself it was fine, that Mom had found a way, that it wasn't my problem to solve. Willful ignorance is still a choice, Jessica. I know. She twisted her engagement ring around her finger, a nervous habit I recognized from childhood. Brandon is furious with me. He says I've been acting entitled and spoiled. He wants to scale everything back, maybe even elope. His parents are offering to pay for a reasonable wedding, but I have to give up all my plans. The Napa venue, the designer dress, the destination bachelorette party, all of it. And that bothers you, I said, not a question. Of course it bothers me. I've been planning this wedding for months. I had a vision, and now it's all crumbling because you reported the charges as fraudulent. There it was. The subtle blame, the implication that I was responsible for the consequences of Mom's theft. No, Jessica. Your wedding is crumbling because Mom stole from me to fund it. I didn't create this situation. I'm simply refusing to be victimized in silence. There's a significant difference. She was quiet for a long moment, watching ducks paddle across the pond. I've always known Mom favored me. It was obvious even when we were kids. You got hand-me-downs while I got new clothes. You got a used car for your 16th birthday while I got a new one. You worked through college while they paid my tuition. I knew it was unfair, but I never said anything because I benefited from it. The admission hung between us, perhaps the most honest thing she'd ever said to me. And now? I asked. Now I'm realizing that favoritism came with a price. Mom never taught me to be self-sufficient. She never let me face real consequences. She always swooped in to fix things, to make everything perfect, even if it meant hurting other people. Like you. Jessica turned to face me. Brandon says if we get married with this foundation, with lies and theft and manipulation, our marriage will be poisoned from the start. He says we need to do this right, even if it means a smaller wedding. Brandon sounds like a smart man. He is. Which is why I'm terrified he'll realize I'm not good enough for him. The vulnerability in her voice surprised me. Jessica had always projected confidence bordering on arrogance. Seeing her doubt herself felt strange, like watching a language you'd only read suddenly spoken aloud. You could be good enough, I said carefully. But it requires changing. Taking responsibility. Setting boundaries with Mom. Living within your means. Those are all choices you can make. I don't know if I know how to do those things. Then learn. Go to therapy. Read books. Talk to Brandon about healthy relationship patterns. You're 29 years old, Jessica. If you want to change, you have the power to do it. But you have to actually want it, not just want the benefits that come from appearing to change. We sat in silence for another few minutes before she stood to leave. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. Really sorry. Not the performative apology Mom does, but genuine regret for how I've treated you and taken you for granted over the years. I appreciate that, I said. And surprisingly, I meant it. My mother showed up at my office on Wednesday. Security called to inform me I had a visitor who was creating a disturbance in the lobby. I had her escorted out and filed a trespassing complaint. The boundaries weren't just emotional anymore. They were legal and physical. Thursday brought a certified letter from Patricia Chen to my parents' home. It outlined the criminal complaints, documented the fraud, and offered a settlement option, full restitution of $26,800 plus legal fees within 30 days, or we proceed with criminal prosecution and civil litigation. My phone exploded with texts from extended family members. Aunts, uncles, cousins, all suddenly very concerned about family harmony and forgiveness. Interesting how none of them had offered to contribute $15,000 to Jessica's wedding fund, but they all had plenty of opinions about my response to being victimized. I blocked them all. Every single one. If they wanted to fund Jessica's excessive wedding, they were welcome to write checks. But I was done being the designated family ATM and emotional punching bag. Friday afternoon, Dad called. His voice sounded older, defeated. Lauren, your mother wants to meet with you. Neutral location. She's willing to discuss repayment. She can discuss it through my attorney. Please. She's your mother. This is killing her. The stress, the shame, the family falling apart. She made a mistake. Can't we find a way through this without lawyers and police? Something in his voice tugged at me. Dad had always been weak, but he wasn't malicious. Just conflict-averse to a fault. She didn't make a mistake, Dad. Mistakes are accidents. She deliberately stole from me, used my personal information to commit fraud, and then justified it by saying families should share resources. That's not a mistake. That's a choice. I know. You're right. But she's willing to make it right now. Please, just meet with her once. If you're not satisfied, proceed with legal action. But give her one chance to apologize face-to-face. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet at a coffee shop equidistant from both our locations. Patricia advised against it but respected my choice. I brought a recording app on my phone, legally permissible in California with one-party consent, just in case. Mom looked like she'd aged a decade in a week. Her hair, usually meticulously styled, hung limp around her face. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. She'd lost weight. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Then I remembered watching my savings account balance drop to nearly nothing. I remembered the panic, the violation, the betrayal. Sympathy evaporated. Thank you for meeting me, she said quietly. I nodded but said nothing. I need you to understand something. I didn't do this to hurt you. I did it because Jessica is getting married, and as her mother, I want to give her the wedding she dreams about. You're successful and independent. She needs support right now. The non-apology was so perfectly Mom that I almost laughed. You're explaining your reasoning. I asked you to apologize. She looked confused. I just did. No, you justified your actions. Apologies include acknowledging harm and taking responsibility without excuses. Her jaw tightened. Fine. I'm sorry I took your money without asking. But I'm not sorry for wanting to help your sister. The two things aren't mutually exclusive. You could have wanted to help Jessica without stealing from me. You could have accepted my no and found legal alternatives. You chose the path that violated my trust and broke the law. So what happens now? You're really going to press charges against your own mother? I leaned back, studying her. That depends entirely on you. Patricia sent settlement terms. Full restitution plus legal fees within 30 days, or we proceed with prosecution. The choice is yours. We don't have that money available right now. We spend it on the wedding. Then unspend it. Cancel vendors. Return deposits. Downgrade to a wedding you can actually afford. Get a loan. Sell something. I genuinely don't care how you acquire the funds. But you will return every penny you stole from me. Her face flushed red. You're being unreasonable. We're family. Why can't you just let it go? Because letting it go teaches you there are no consequences for stealing from me. It teaches Jessica she can demand anything and someone else will pay the price. It teaches me my boundaries don't matter, and I should accept abuse from people who claim to love me. None of those are lessons I'm willing to reinforce. I stood to leave. She grabbed my wrist, desperation in her eyes. Please. Jessica's wedding will be destroyed. She'll never forgive me. This will ruin her special day. I gently removed her hand. Maybe she shouldn't have planned a wedding you couldn't afford. Maybe she should have accepted what you could reasonably contribute. Maybe she should have let Brandon's wealthy parents help. Or maybe she should have had a smaller, more modest wedding. Those were all viable options. Stealing from me should never have been on the table. I walked out of the coffee shop feeling lighter than I had in years. The guilt that had always lived in my chest, the sense that I owed my family endless patience and sacrifice, had finally released its grip. That evening, Brandon called. His voice was level, professional. Lauren, this is Brandon Hayes. I want you to know I had no idea about what your mother did. Jessica told me her parents were covering certain expenses, and I assumed it was their money. When I learned the truth, I was appalled. Interesting. I'd expected him to defend his fiancée. I appreciate you saying that. I've talked to Jessica about expectations and boundaries. Her relationship with your family is complicated, and I don't fully understand all the dynamics. But I know theft is unacceptable. I've told your mother I'll personally ensure the money is returned to you within 2 weeks. Relief flooded through me. Thank you, Brandon. Truly. I'm also scaling back the wedding to something reasonable. Jessica wasn't happy about it initially, but she's coming around. We don't need to start our marriage drowning in debt or built on stolen money. My parents offered to help, and we're accepting a reasonable contribution from them. After we hung up, I realized Brandon might be the best thing that ever happened to Jessica. He had boundaries. He understood accountability. Maybe he'd teach my sister some much-needed lessons about living within reality. True to his word, Brandon had a cashier's check delivered to Patricia's office 10 days later. The full amount, $26,800 plus $3,200 in legal fees. Patricia deposited it into my account, and I watched the balance restore itself. The relief was overwhelming. But I also liquidated my savings and moved everything to a new bank with enhanced security. The credit card company had already issued me a new card with a different number, and I'd set up fraud alerts on all my accounts. I consulted with a financial advisor about protecting my assets from future family interference. And I changed my emergency contact information to my best friend Melissa instead of my parents. Jessica's wedding happened on schedule, scaled back significantly. I wasn't invited. Neither were most of the extended family who'd pressured me to drop the issue. Apparently, Brandon's parents had some strong opinions about guest lists and drama. I heard about it secondhand through a cousin who was still speaking to me. The ceremony was at a local botanical garden instead of Napa. The reception was at a nearby restaurant. The dress came from a bridal boutique instead of Kleinfeld's. It sounded lovely and intimate, exactly what a wedding should be. My parents sent a brief email 3 weeks after the wedding. Mom had written it, but Dad's name appeared on the signature line. Lauren, we hope you're well. We wanted you to know that we've had time to reflect on what happened. While we still believe families should support each other, we understand we crossed a boundary by accessing your accounts without permission. We're working with a therapist to address communication issues and respect for boundaries. We hope eventually we can rebuild our relationship, but we understand if you need space. Love, Mom and Dad. It wasn't a real apology. But it acknowledged wrongdoing without excessive justification. Small progress. I didn't respond immediately. I needed time to decide what, if any, relationship I wanted with them going forward. Therapy had taught me that forgiveness didn't require reconciliation. I could forgive the hurt without inviting them back into my life. Boundaries weren't walls keeping people out, they were gates I could choose to open or keep closed. Melissa and I went out for dinner that Friday to celebrate the resolution. She raised her glass of wine in a toast. To standing up for yourself, even when it's hard. To boundaries, I added. And a family we choose rather than family we're born into. We clinked glasses. Around us, the restaurant buzzed with Friday night energy. Couples on dates. Friends catching up. People living their lives without the weight of toxic family dynamics dragging them down. For the first time in months, I felt genuinely happy. The validation wasn't coming from my family's approval or Jessica's gratitude or Mom's acknowledgement. It came from within, from knowing I'd stood firm when pressured to fold. I'd protected myself when no one else would. I demanded accountability when everyone else wanted to sweep things under the rug. 6 months later, Jessica reached out via text. Simple, direct. I'm sorry for what happened. I didn't fully understand how much mom pressured you or how wrong it was for her to take your money. Brandon helped me see things differently. I'd like to talk sometime, if you're open to it. I stared at the message for a long time. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to maintain the comfortable distance I'd established. But another part remembered Jessica as a kid, before competition and favoritism had twisted our relationship. We'd played together, shared secrets, been allies against parental rules. I typed a response, I'm willing to have coffee and talk. But I need you to understand that rebuilding trust will take time, and I have hard boundaries now that aren't negotiable. Her reply came quickly, I understand. Thank you for being willing to try. We met the following week at the same coffee shop where I confronted Mom. Jessica looked different, softer somehow, less polished and performative. Marriage seemed to suit her, or maybe it was just maturity finally catching up. Thank you for meeting me, she said, echoing Mom's words from months earlier. But her tone was different. Genuine. You're welcome. I need to say something, and I need you to let me finish before responding. Can you do that? I nodded. I was a terrible sister to you. For years. I took you for granted. I expected you to celebrate my achievements while minimizing yours. I accepted Mom's favoritism without questioning it because it benefited me. And when she stole from you to fund my wedding, my first instinct was to defend her and blame you for not just going along with it. She paused, eyes glistening. That was wrong. All of it. You deserved better from me, and I'm genuinely sorry. The apology caught me off guard. Real contrition was so rare in my family. Brandon helped me understand healthy family dynamics, she continued. His parents have boundaries. They support each other without sacrificing themselves. They celebrate successes without turning it into competition. Being around them made me realize how dysfunctional our family was, and how I contributed to that dysfunction. I appreciate you saying all that, I said carefully. But words are just the beginning. I need to see change behavior over time before I can fully trust you again. I know. I'm not asking for instant forgiveness. I'm asking for a chance to prove I can be better. We talked for over an hour. She told me about marriage, about how Brandon's influence was reshaping her perspective on money, family, and relationships. I told her about my work, the condo I'd finally purchased, the life I was building on my terms. It wasn't perfect. Years of hurt don't dissolve in a single conversation. But it was a start. Mom and Dad remained more complicated. We exchanged occasional texts on holidays. They sent a birthday card with a generic message. I responded politely but didn't initiate contact. The relationship existed in a holding pattern, not hostile, but not close either. I was okay with that. Not every relationship needs to be fully restored. Sometimes the healthiest choice is peaceful distance. A year after the wedding debacle, I received a promotion at work. Senior Vice President of Client Relations, with a substantial raise and profit-sharing package. I celebrated with Melissa, with my chosen family of friends who'd supported me through everything. I didn't tell my parents about the promotion. It was mine to savor without the complication of their response, whether it would be genuine pride or veiled suggestions about how I should share my success with the family. Jessica sent a congratulations text when she found out through social media. Simple, supportive, without expectation. Progress. The trauma of being stolen from by your own mother doesn't vanish completely. Sometimes I still check my bank accounts obsessively, making sure balances are correct. Sometimes I have nightmares about financial insecurity. But therapy helps. Time helps. Building a life based on my values rather than family obligation helps. People often ask if I regret how I handled things. If I wish I'd been more forgiving, more family-oriented, more willing to let it go. The answer is no. Not even a little bit. Standing up for myself taught me I was worth fighting for. It demonstrated that boundaries aren't selfish, they're essential. It showed my family that I couldn't be manipulated or guilted into compliance anymore. Some people called me vindictive. Others said I was brave. I think I was simply someone who finally decided her own well-being mattered as much as anyone else's comfort. And honestly, that realization was worth every uncomfortable conversation, every burned bridge, every moment of doubt. Because on the other side of that conflict, I found something invaluable. Self-respect. The knowledge that I could protect myself, even when it meant disappointing people I loved. The understanding that family doesn't justify abuse, and love doesn't require self-sacrifice. These days, when I look at my bank account, I don't just see numbers. I see security I fought for. Boundaries I enforced. A future I'm building on my own terms. Mom stole my money and thought she'd get away with it. Instead, she gave me something far more valuable, the final push I needed to stop setting myself on fire to keep other people warm. And that's a gift I'll carry with me for the rest of my life.